Welcome to Prose and Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land this podcast was created on.
Hello, and welcome to the Pros and Cons podcast, where sometimes we feel like pros and sometimes we feel like cons. Today, I'll be your host, James Healy, and I'm joined by Ali Burnham.
Hello.
Alex Eldridge.
Hiya.
And Phoenix Raig.
Hello.
Today, we're going to be talking about writing competitions. But first, I just want to throw it over to Phoenix for a little announcement.
Oh, yeah. And first of all, I just want to apologize for if I sound kind of muted right now, because I did wake up very early for this one. It's like 5:30 right now. So I feel I'm awake, but I feel kind of quiet right now. So maybe this will be soothing and relaxing for those listening. Yeah, we had some pretty big news over this last week. Myself and Matan each got a nomination in different categories for the Aurealis Award, which is, according to Google, Australia's premier speculative fiction awards. It's pretty cool. You could look across a few different publishers in Australia that are pretty well known in Australia, and they treat it like a pretty big deal. So yeah, I'm pretty pumped, especially as I've been looking around. It's been very cool. Basically, it's they put out an award every year. They capture a little bit of a short list and, of course, finalists off of that short list, but they archive those short lists every year, and it's meant to be kind of like a snapshot. According to them, short lists are not only a great guide to basic bookshelf selection for the best Australian works, but also a useful survey of nearly 30 years worth of significant topics and themes, a who's who of the genre locally, and the growth of the Australian publishing industry's commitment to the genre. So it's kind of like a year-by-year snapshot of kind of what's going on in speculative fiction and authors and publishers of note, like who's kind of in the game, who's there. And Precipice Fiction is now in there twice. So that's pretty cool.
You've probably
seen very excited.
Go off about it on social media. We put in for the Aurealis because it's a short list I watch every year to get an idea of who I should be reading in the Australian scene. And it's the publishers that are submitting to it. There's I think HarperCollins, Text Publishing, Penguin Random House. I think back when there was Voyager was submitting to it. So big publishers in the Australian scene, and big names, like even this year, Tom Taylor, who's like big Australian comic book, like he's the guy. He's writing for DC at the moment. He's writing Teen Titans for DC at the moment. Alan Baxter.
Saw that.
He's rad. Alan Baxter's nominated again. I think he's like a 14-time Aurealis nominee. Angela Slater and Astrid Schultz, who I've met a few times as well. She's great. Her second novel's nominated. And even just as an aside, Westwards, who I work for, one of our books is nominated as well. So it's an exciting time. And to kind of feel like, I'm involved in the publishing team where a book we worked on for however long has received 2 nods. It's very exciting. So congratulations, Phoenix, and congratulations, Matan. For Enter Elias Schmidt and Glyphlight for those playing at home.
Cool. So what has everyone been reading this week? Alex, I'll throw it over to you first.
What have I been reading? I've been reading a little bit more of The Witches of Eastwick, which has been pretty good. Really enjoyed that. And I also just bought Elden Ring, which is its own thing, because I don't know, I always feel like I miss the cultural zeitgeist of things, especially video games, because I've never had a console that can really keep up. But I was like, the DLC is coming out, so I'll jump on and see what it's all about. And that's been really fun. It is very George R.R. Martin. It's a lot of swords and sorcery, not quite as dark as the regular like Dark Soul games, but it's fun. It's a big sprawling world like Breath of the Wild, and it's an experience.
Yeah, it kind of felt like Breath of the Wild dialed up like
Yeah.
quite a bit. It's intense.
That's Breath of the Wild with zombies, sort of.
Phoenix, how about yourself? What have you been reading this week?
I've been reading my usual lately. I finally got back on with Frankenstein. I'd put it down for quite a bit because I have been reading a lot of The Chamber of Secrets in Spanish, and I've been focusing on that because one, it's fun because it's Harry Potter, but also it's like I get to read and practice Spanish at the same time, so it just feels so efficient. So like I've been sticking with that for a bit. I'm almost done with it, which feels cool. And then my partner and I just started rewatching Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, which we both love very much. Oh, and I've watched quite a bit of Spy Family as well, and that's very fun.
Good.
Very fun anime. Yeah.
It's so fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm all caught up, so I'm desperately waiting for like more.
Yeah. Is it 2 seasons? 1 season?
Just the one for now, I think.
Just the one for now, but the more's coming, but just not fast
okay,
enough.
cool.
Yeah.
I'm nearly done with it then. It's just the one. Cool. Yeah, that's for me.
Nice.
I've been doing a fair bit of gaming at the moment.
Hogwarts Legacy. Represent.
Legacy. I feel like it's the game that should not be named, but not entering that discourse. But I have been sinking a lot of hours into it, and I am enjoying it. I set myself the goal of creating the most British boy I could as my character avatar, and I keep him as British as possible at every opportunity.
What's his name?
The most British boy.
I named him Alistair Braithwaite.
Oh God.
The most British boy.
my British Harry Potter character. And the tension between him and Sebastian it's landing. It's perfect. They didn't intend it to be a dating sim, but it is. That's what I feel like I'm playing.
Is that your headcanon?
Yes.
I love that.
I don't even have to read into it. They're the ones who give it like all this dialogue. Like, okay, setting the scene for one moment that happened where Sebastian's waiting for me he's kind of standing on a bit of a spire in a small town, and I fly in on my broomstick and land next to him. And then the cutscene opens and my character goes, enjoying the view. Like, that's just the written dialogue. And I'm like, okay, I'm for this ride. I love it.
I'm here for it.
I'm here for it. Aside from that, so something I've started listening to for all the audiobook fans out there, the new Mythic audiobook is underway, and we'll be able to get it into your ear holes real soon. So soon, in fact, I've started listening to all the audio files of, I think we're only waiting on one voice artist to come back to us. Otherwise, we've received the rest. The one that came in a couple of days ago was Rupert Degas. We're a little bit excited about him because he's quite a big name. You will know his voice from The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. And we've managed to score him for the Stolen Sword. And I'll preface this by saying he's done a fantastic job. It's brilliant. You're all going to enjoy it. I really struggle to listen to it without having a visceral bodily reaction because it's this combination of a voice actor I respect so much reading my stuff, and I nearly cringed myself like into an aneurysm listening to the first scene. Like, he's done such a good job, but something about I'm like, I want everyone to listen to this but me. I really it was an event. But I think I've calmed down off that, and I'll be able to listen to the rest of it and actually enjoy it. But the first listen was confronting. It was confronting.
Oh, true.
Imagine that's intense.
Yeah. When I reread my story for the first time, it took me like a month or month and a half to get my copy of the new Mythic, but when I finally sat down and read my story for the first time in a while, like every comma everywhere I wanted to have a comma was just like a red giant flag for me,
Yeah.
and I had a hard time reading I enjoyed it a lot, but I had a hard time reading it. Like I really had to, all right, calm down, just breathe.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah. But yours is now award nominated, so I think you did okay. None of those commas did you
Mhm.
any harm.
This is me. This is me disagreeing with the Aurealis judges. I'm like, let me in there. You don't know. I'll judge my
Let me
own.
tinker.
You don't know what you're doing.
I did have this moment where I thought I misheard something Rupert had spoken, and I'm like, did I fuck up a sentence? So I've run and grabbed my copy and read it back, and I'm like, no, that is right. That is okay. No, it's not a spelling mistake on my end. And I went back and listened to it, and he said it right. Like I've just imagined this error, and I freaked out over it, being like, did it print that way? Anyway, yeah, visceral experience.
And for the record, that was a joke. The Aurealis judges did a very good job.
Brilliant. At least two great decisions were made.
Yeah.
Two great decisions.
And I sat down and watched. Is anyone familiar with the manga Blame or Blam?
No.
Okay, I think I've seen the name before. It sounds familiar.
Oh, wait, is that the sci-fi one that's like
the one with the big city?
It's super post-apocalyptic, and they're like in suits and things. Yeah, I saw that actually, the anime of it. I really liked it.
Super post-apocalyptic.
Yeah, really narrowing it down there. Sorry, but I know the one you're talking about. I think, yeah.
So like I
Matrix
came across just pictures of that manga, like because I don't really read like anime and stuff, but I just came across pictures, and I was like, "What is that?" I really want to know more about what that is, because there's very little dialogue, very little storyline, very little of it is explained. From series to series, it's predominantly just this one guy wandering through these massive landscapes, and the landscapes are often really densely illustrated depictions of like a massive city, like a superstructure of a city, but it's completely uninhabited. It kind of doesn't make any sense as well. Like it's kind of laid out as in like really narrow corridors, but then there's huge areas of space that are uninhabited.
Love that.
Can't remember what the terminology for that is, but it's like when you see large areas that look like they should be inhabited, but they're empty. There's a certain word for what that is. It's an art thing. But this is basically what the comic book is just page after page of that, and then sudden scenes of like very visceral violence. But Netflix made a little film for it. Doesn't really land because I guess it's kind of like a different medium, and they try to put in a whole storyline and stuff, and it wasn't really the same. But yeah, that was what I watched this week, and it kind of just reminded me how much I loved the comic book, and I kind of went back and I was just reading back through that and being like, yeah, this is an experience. Like, this is really weird. It's not really about the storyline. It's more about how the illustrations make you feel as you're going through them, because it's all of that expanse gives the sense of like loneliness and a sense of confusion and the sense of like being lost and stuff like that. It's really cool stuff.
Wow.
Cool.
Okay, so
add that to my list.
Yeah, pretty dark, but yeah, definitely check it out. So I guess we'll jump into our theme for today, and that is writing competitions. I'd like to just jump around real quick and ask, what is everyone's experience with writing competitions? Has anyone entered them? Have they entered a few? I myself have only ever entered two, just quite recently. I entered an Irish writing competition with RTE for a short story. And I recently entered another competition, which was like the first 10,000 words of a manuscript, and they would give you feedback, or you could, for an extra $100, you could get feedback from what they thought of that. So those are my two experiences. And how about yourselves?
I've done a little bit of competitions in the past. I can only think of, I'm sure I've submitted to like quite a few, just short story competitions, and I just sort of like, I think I kind of threw something together. One I did get a nomination for was the Writers of the Future one, weirdly started by L. Ron Hubbard, I think. Yeah, it's quite a prestigious science fiction fantasy competition. So it was, I got an honorable mention for that, which is obviously not a win. But I think but yeah, no, that was nice. I've got the little certificate, and it's it's framed, so that'll be like, that's my first little writing thing I want. So yeah, but not much experience beyond that.
My experience, apart from the present experience, which has been a great experience, before now, it's been very like competitions have been very stressful for me. Like my memory of them is just I'd submitted to a few and never really heard anything. But it was mostly just I would just get overwhelmed by competition lists because it would be like, all right, today I'm going to submit to a few competitions. And then like you find these massive lists on Google of like, every country has their own competitions, and some of them have pretty hefty entry fees. So it's just like, like how many am I going to do? Like, do I just go for the free ones? I'll spend a little bit for some entry fees, blah. I found myself like I submit to one or two maybe, and I just kind of lose steam so fast. I'm just like, oh, whoa. But yeah, I think the key is maybe not caring so much, or not like you submit and don't think about it, don't worry about it, and that helps mentally. That's been me.
For my own experience with competitions, I think I've had an okay run of it. Majority of my CV, and we'll probably talk about this, how competitions make great CV building. If you don't have published work, what you put in your bio are your long list, your short lists, and your nominations. So I do recommend it as an excellent place to start. It's certainly where I started in the film industry. One of the biggest kind of boosts to my early career was a competition called The Shoot. It was a young filmmakers competition where they put out a call out for one cinematographer, one director, some actors, and one screenwriter. So it was like they wanted to bring the HODs of a short film together. It was being run by Samsung, Snyder, and Baz Luhrmann, of all people, came together to create like this. It was a bit of a publicity stunt. I don't want to talk crap about it. It was a great opportunity, but basically Samsung had a phone to sell. And they wanted to like create this hype about how they're supporting creatives. So they're like, we're going to fund this competition. We're going to get all these young filmmakers together. We're going to fund them to make a short film. And then we can screen the film, and it can be like an advert for Samsung, and also just like also a great starting point for the career of these young creatives. It was kind of the ethos of this thing. And I think they went quite wide with it, and I was quite lucky to be selected as the screenwriter on the team. And I met some excellent creatives. Like I'm still in contact to this day with the actors, the director, and the production design girls that were selected. We've all remained in the industry. We're all filmmakers in our same discipline.
Wow.
And kind of talking to that one was very funny because I think the script I submitted was not the script we ended up going with. I think the script I submitted ended up just being a demonstration that I could write. And then they had a phone call with potentially the shortlist, I think. And I think I must have done okay on the phone call because they asked me to pitch a new idea on the spot. They're like, we liked your writing, but we can't make your idea. Do you have any other ideas? And I'm like, oh, fucking come at me. So I pitched on the spot, and then that's the idea. I got picked because of that, and we ended up going with that, which I think was very interesting because they wouldn't have made the others do that because I was the writer. It was the rest came on after the idea would have been selected. So I think they had to pick me first. Now that I'm like playing it back in my head, they would have gone script, then brought on the director and the actors. Anyway, it was an excellent competition is what I'm circling back to, in that even though that short film was kind of screened once and wasn't entered into anything else, it just became like the first mark in my CV that I had done this thing, and I was able to take that on to when applying to other things. That there's a trust in the bigger your bio gets, almost for the next opportunity, someone's taking less of a risk on you. Yeah, and I think this is incredibly relevant, even to competitions. I think there's a bit of a sheen and a mystique that even with blind competitions, it would be just based on the value of the work. But I think towards the pointy end, they are going to look at people's CV, because any organization that's running a competition, the person they pick becomes a marketing tool, and they have to be a little bit strategic in who they pick. It's the unfortunate reality of a lot of the competitions out there. So I think the bigger your CV gets, the less risk you are. So that's why you start to see people's careers avalanche after a while. Once the CV gets bigger, then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's not an accident. Like, yes, it's raw. They're getting better. They're advancing in their career, but I think there's an element of they become less risk averse for the next thing they apply for. At least in my humble opinion, because I feel like that's what I watched happen to myself. I don't think I'm necessarily an incredibly amazing writer. I think I'm just a hardworking writer. I think I'm talking strictly about my film experience here, and that being able to jump to the next thing. Again, I'll list my bio, so it sounds like I'm not completely talking out my ass, but I've been nominated for an actor award. So Unsound was nominated for Best Indie Film 2020. The actors, I suppose, are arguably Australia's biggest film body. And that same film in 2020 was nominated for an Augie. We've already made a big deal on the podcast about when I won an Augie last year. So that's 2022 for Metropius. I've awkwardly got it sitting on the shelf behind me for people watching the YouTube. And I've been longlisted on Australian Writers Guild's primetime competition. I've been longlisted on Screencraft's action and thriller writing competition. And then if short films count, 2.0's also had a fairly healthy festival run, in that it was in competition. So that's considered a nomination when films get into short films. So I guess what I'm trying to summarize is it feels like a momentum thing. It's not any of these, each individual things just happen to be incredibly amazing. I think it's because this one was able to build on the CV of this one, which made it easier to get it into that thing, which was able to make it easier to get that thing into the next thing. So I think that's what I'm honing in on.
To me, it's always felt like I'm playing Katamari Damacy, and it's like my CV is slowly able to pick up bigger and bigger pieces as I just push it. But like at the beginning, like my CV was pretty much like, it's hard to get published. It's very hard to get published. I'm still not commercially published. But like, so before that, I just kind of started inventing ways to publish myself. I started inventing projects for myself. I started funding myself, not like huge, massive financial risks, very, 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 very small, no risk at all, not expecting any return, but just started creating my own projects. And slowly I had stuff. At one point, it was like my CV looks very impressive, and I made all these are things I made for myself. But it was enough to be like, I have something to say when people talk to me. And then slowly that started picking up things. And as some of those seeds started growing, suddenly my CV started growing. And yeah, now like my CV is kind of like a little trophy shelf now. And every time I put a new thing on it, I'm like, yes, cool.
This may sound, I don't know, callous, but it was advice I was given by a mentor, is when your CV starts building like that, the advice was not to put everything in the CV, because that's starting to look like you're, I have a better word, trying too hard. I hate that, but it's like if you're more selective, it kind of comes across with the confidence that you don't need to list everything. You're just like, oh, I'm just going to cherry pick a couple of things. I don't need to tell you all about it. You can click and read more if you want to, but I'm not going to give you all that. I don't need to give you all that.
Yeah. I guess it'd be like your CV straight out of college versus like a few years into your career. It's like you start taking off your clubs from college. Like you start just letting it fall off the end, like because your recent things are going to be a little bit that's going to be what they're going to want to see.
In saying that, I feel like it's really basic advice, but this feels like it could be a basic advice kind of podcast, is tailoring your bio to each competition. Something that has a bit more of like my manuscript submissions into competitions. I won't focus too much on my film stuff. That's not relevant, but I will mention my Verona residency. While my Verona residency means very little to a film thing I'm applying for. So there is room to, once you have a little bag that you can pull things out of, just tailoring your bio to each individual competition you enter.
One thing I think I would say, moving away from the references aspect of it to competition specific stuff, is that if anyone is this is writing competitions, obviously, if you're the sort of person who sees a competition and is like, oh, okay, I've only really got a week to do this, or like 2 weeks to do it. And let's say it's a short story. Let's get really, really specific. So I remember one competition that I was in, and it was based on prompts, right? And I wrote one story, and I was like, well, I don't really like that. I've only got 4 days to do. I'm just going to try and write another one. I would recommend against that. I would say, instead of like, if you've got a prompt-based writing competition, because a lot of them are, to stop you from just submitting trunk work, which sometimes we're tempted to do. Yeah, if you got something and you're done with it, and I'd suggest this of any writing really, if you've got something and you're done with it, rather than throw the baby out with the bathwater, really look at what you've got and go, okay, what part of this do I like, and what part of this doesn't work as well? And then, instead of like trying to redo the whole thing in a different way, workshop it from that one kernel of, well, that bit was really cool when he like pulled out the gun, because the guy was threatening his wife or something. That was really good. Rework it around that, rather than going, I hated that, let me just try it all again, because it's very tempting to go like, too hard. I've found inevitably you get more juice out of it if you have a chance to workshop it a bit, as opposed to just trying to shoehorn a new piece using that prompt. Yeah.
Quick question for the group, just kind of off the back of what Alex said about writing to prompts. If you're just scrolling through your social media and you see that an organization you follow has a call for submissions, and say they're closing in 2 months, would you write to that deadline, or would you be the kind of person being like, no, I'm not currently in my submission window, and then wait until you're ready for your thing to go out in the world and then hunt opportunities? Or I don't know, I'm just curious.
I definitely write it first and then hunt for a competition for it. I do think it's a good idea to like look around for a specific type of competition. Like, I'd write a lot of like science fiction or horror, so I'd be looking for those kind of competitions. And then if they have a prompt, or if they have something for it, I'll try to come up with an idea from that. But there'll have to be no time pressure, because I wouldn't do it. I would spend ages procrastinating and then writing a first draft, and then feel like I couldn't get it done. Whereas having a story that's nearly finished and then shopping around for a competition, getting the word count, getting the time limit, is the best way for me to really concentrate on finishing off that story. So from that point of view, that's what I found the competitions most useful for, was to actually just finish something and then have it quite finely tuned. If I thought it was like a good enough story. So that's been quite good in that regard, rather than like, I haven't won anything, I haven't been nominated, so I don't know about whether it's kind of worth the time for that from that respect. But definitely for making me finish stuff and making me finish it to like a high degree, it's been really useful motivator.
I'm one of those people that if there is a prompt, I do try to see if one of my current pieces fits into the prompt. But I am also very honest with myself. Like, I don't stretch it. Like, if it's like, or I don't know, maybe depending on what mood I'm in, I'll stretch it. But like, usually if it's like, no, none of my work fits in there, like I will just leave it alone. But I do like shopping around. It's kind of fun in that way, because usually with the short stories, it's like, oh, I've spent such a good, like I've had a good time in this little world. I want to find a competition that honors little worlds like these. 'Cause, yeah, well, that's why there are categories. But so I do that. One that I do, there is a prompt competition that I write for every now and then called Furious Fiction. It's put on by, what's that, Writing New South Wales? No, it's one of the bigger organizations in Australia. They host this international competition every 3 months now, I think, called Furious Fiction. It's a 500 word prompted short story competition. You have one weekend to write it. And the prompts are pretty fun because it's not, they're pretty loose, light and loose. Like just, your first sentence has to start with this. You have to use these 5 words somewhere in your story. Like it's really fun. So I'll write to that one. I've written for that one maybe like 6 times or so. Never got mentioned. So it feels kind of like a void to me a little bit. But I still, so now it's just like when I see a prompt, it's just like, well, I feel like having fun with this weekend. I'll just do it. That's a bit of fun. But no expectations for that one. Although every time I submit, I'm like, that one's got to get mentioned. Yeah.
Can I ask, does anyone read previous winners of competitions that they've entered to see what kind of thing they go for?
Yeah,
is that good?
It look, it really gives you a sense of what the judges are looking for. Like even within the spec fic sort of umbrella, there can be something that are more tailored towards like pulpy stuff, or something that's maybe a little more literary, with more purple prose, shall we say, or something that's maybe on the more fantasy, Dungeons and Dragons side of stuff. So yeah, I think you can really get a sense of like, hey, this is maybe not exactly the vibe, because if you read like 2 or 3 of them, you'll have a pretty strong sense of what the judges are going for. So yeah, for sure, I think that's, you always want to know your market when you're going for it, and just see what you're up against.
Especially if it's competition run by a publisher, I think they already know what they want. I feel like there's this young emerging writers mentality that might be like, look, it's an open call for just, I fit within the brackets, but say your work is nothing like the previous year's winners, and you might think, oh, but mine is good enough to overcome.
Yeah.
They've never picked a fantasy, but this is the year they'll pick a fantasy. I don't think so, especially if it's run by a publisher. They're making marketing decisions. It's the risk-averse decisions. They're running competitions in the hope that they can find the next manuscript they would have otherwise already taken. So I would absolutely say, if it's a publisher-run competition, look at what they're already publishing.
For competitions, I have not read previous works before, but I do when I'm looking for publishers for, I'm actually on a submitting spree for one of my children's manuscripts right now. And for publishers and stuff, I do look at previous works. And even if their work doesn't tend to match mine, sometimes I will submit anyway, just to see what's up. But I kind of know in my head a little bit before time, like this one's not really a fit. I'm gonna submit just because why not? But their work doesn't totally match mine. I'm not expecting much here, and I kind of level my expectations accordingly. As well as there are some where, like, if I did hear back, like I would have to think about it for a second just to see how I want my work, if I do want my work amongst theirs or whatever, which hopefully I'd have the power to say no if a publisher said they wanted me, but I didn't kind of meld with the rest of their work. I would hope I could say no, but that would be a hard no to say. But I do look at it.
And I guess I'll phrase it in these terms, because it took me a while for this to click even in my own head. But once I kind of understood this is how the industry works, then I felt I could navigate it a bit better. But this idea that a publisher won't take a risk on a manuscript outside of their catalog because they don't have the audience built for it. So if say they took the risk on you, the new genre, they're not just taking on a new book, they're like, well, how do we find an audience we're not already connected with? They'll be taking manuscripts they already know they can put it in the hands of a pre-existing audience. So it's like, we've already got a pipeline to those people, so we're going to take a manuscript and just put it in their hands, and that's the pipeline. By expecting them to take a risk on something outside of their usual thing, it's they've got to find a whole new audience they don't have.
And you hear that all the time too. Sorry, Alex.
Yeah.
You hear that all the time in terms of authors saying, well, I shopped it around at this publisher and that publisher, but they sort of said, oh, look, we don't really know how to sell this. And it's like, well, what does that mean? What do you mean you don't know how to sell it? What it means is that they literally have not carved out that market. They don't have that audience. So they're not used to,
or they don't have tracks.
Yeah, they're not used to finding that traffic. So it's just it's more, like you said, it's more than selling the book. It's carving out a market, a little niche in which to sell. And if they want to do that with more books, then maybe they'll choose to do that. But that's pretty risky from a publishing perspective. So it's worth to bear that part of the pie in mind, I suppose.
I'm just going to add that it was a bitter pill for me to swallow as a speculative fiction writer in Australia. And just kind of, when I first started writing, being like, where are all the speculative fiction publishers? Where are they? Why don't they want to take all this amazing work? And it was just understanding the foundation that even though you can argue there's an audience for speculative fiction readers in Australia, it's the international publishers that are currently feeding them, not the local publishing houses that are feeding. They don't have the tracks to the local audience. So they would need to get out the bricks and mortar and build new roads to get over this hump of accepting speculative fiction manuscripts in Australia.
What I did because this is when I didn't get shortlisted in the first competition I entered, but they send you out an email to let you know. That was when I went back and read all of their previous winners. And sure enough, it was like I was writing very dark science fiction, whereas theirs was all very modern contemporary stuff. So I went back and read it then to like make myself feel better. That I was like, it just wasn't a right fit. It wasn't that my writing was bad. It just wasn't a good fit. So that kind of brings me on to my next question of what do we think about it in terms of, I guess, kind of mental health, and in terms of your confidence as a writer to be going into competitions and to not take it personally, and kind of how to have the right attitude about putting your work out there in that way. Phoenix, I know you were saying how you find it incredibly stressful. And I myself kind of like, I know I did, like, I was prepared for like a rejection, but then when I got it, I had a little moment of, so I did go in and like read all the past ones. So what do we think about that? And do we have any advice or any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So yeah, the stress, it's like, I think I have a good relationship now. This is a little bit different. This is more so with time and work management. Is submissions do take time to especially do them well, especially for publisher submissions. They want to see a lot from you, proposals, cover letters, all this stuff, and you have to think about it. So I used to sit down with this mentality of like, all right, 5 submissions, boom, here we go. And it just like, I'd lose steam so fast because I'd see these big lists, I'd see all this work and all this stuff. So that's kind of where the stress would come in, because it's like, you have to sort out the good competitions from the kind of just not so good competitions. You have to, if they are asking for money, you have to like do some research on them. Like, all right, are they just trying to get money from people, but this isn't really anything? And as well as all the work, you have to manage that. Now I'm kind of doing it where it's like, 1 a day for my current manuscript. And it's like, it feels more, it works. So that's where the lists would kind of chip away at my steam pretty quick, because it just feels like a vacuum. But like in terms of getting denials and stuff, it's been like, yeah, it's a little rough. It's a little rough, but like at the same time, it's like so crucial, because like now now it doesn't really affect me all that much, because it's like I know who I am as a writer. I know my aspirations. I know what I'm looking to do. So a no doesn't stop my aspirations. A no doesn't stop what I'm trying to do. It doesn't stop what I've already achieved. And so it's like I had to kind of find myself as a writer and get that mentality that I had at the beginning of like, oh, I'm the next big thing. I'm going to be discovered. Someone quick discover me, because otherwise I have to do all this work. Because I wasn't like quickly discovered right in my first year of being a writer, I had to, ask myself some pretty hard questions. I had to kind of plug in with my own, like, this is what I want and this is what I'm going to do. And if I want it, like, and just kind of not waiting for someone to find me. Because of that, getting a no doesn't stop what I'm trying to do. So I don't feel it as much, and I feel like a power unto myself a little bit. It's like I'm here in the writing world. It doesn't matter if any other people in the writing world are saying yes to me. I'm still here. And so that's done a lot for mental health. I have a lot of resolution there. As well as now, because of that, when I do submit to publishers and agents and stuff, they are looking for collaborators. They're not looking to discover someone to then just hold their hand and walk them through it, because it is a huge financial risk to them. Yeah. So not only does your writing have to be good, obviously, yeah, because there are a lot of very good writers out there, and they're getting a lot of, even once you cut away the people that, maybe do have a little more refining to do in their work, you still have a large pile of very good work. So publishers do have a lot to pick from. They are going to pick the ones that are less risk averse, as well as beyond risk averse, they want someone that does have some work under their belt, who does have maybe a social following. That's not as big of a thing, but like, but at least is like, they know what they're doing. They know the industry. They know the market. They know what's going on. They're doing work on their own and are here to collaborate. We can talk. We can work things out together. As opposed to someone that's just like, please take my book. I hope it's like, isn't it good? So to be able to present myself as a collaborator now very confidently feels great. And if it's a no, I don't take it personally. It's just like a fellow person didn't feel like collaborating right now. Yeah,
I think you made a really good point about competition entry fees, Phoenix, in that a lot of them out there are free. Some of them are quite small fees that are just admin fees, and I would argue a sensible admin fee is under $30. But you're going to see competitions out there that are about 120 Australian dollars. And I think at that point, some predatory alarm bells should probably start ringing. Like $30 is an admin fee, 120 is not an admin fee. At that point, that's a competition that is a business model. So it's just my personal opinion, but I'd be a little bit wary of the competitions that cost that amount of money. And like, we're already as writers expected to put so much front-loaded labor into our work. Even before we cross this threshold into competitions and submitting, that even this extra financial gap. Stop me before I get on like a ranty high horse, but just kind of this economic privilege barrier for that it gatekeeps some voices a little bit. So I am interested in kind of the work I'm doing at Westwards as a non-for-profit. I'm personally interested in trying to solve this little conundrum about how can we remove the financial barriers to first publication to allow writers to get the first run on the board, so they're no longer as risk averse to traditional publishing. So that it's a personal passion of mine. I don't have the answers yet, but just everything you're saying, Phoenix, I hear you talk about the hours you're doing, how you're building yourself into a collaborator, someone who's already doing all the social media work, the marketing work. It's fascinating how us as writers need to wear several full-time job hats to have a crack at this as professional practicing writers.
Yeah, I resonate a lot with what you're saying there, Phoenix, about being kind of true and solid in your own person, as opposed to waiting for validation from others. And to put that in very real terms, I think basically when you start writing, you don't have a lot of capital in terms of, well, firstly, financial capital. It's unlikely unless, you've got a previous job that you're coming from. But you don't have a lot of social capital in terms of the other writers and industry people You probably don't have a lot of social capital in terms of your media network. And frankly, anyone who's starting writing is probably not going to be that great a writer. There's just a certain level of hard graft you have to do to get into that. So as I would advise younger writers to, as soon as you can, try and divorce yourself from this mentality of like, oh, I'm going to be discovered, I'm going to do it, and it's going to take off from there. It does happen, but setting yourself up for that is literally the odds equivalent of winning the lottery. It is the same thing. A much more stable way of approaching this, and this goes for competitions as well, is going, okay, I am building a base and I'm going to slowly put layers on this. Those layers can be in terms of building your craft. That's the crucial one, obviously. But also in terms of building your social media presence, reaching out to those around you. I mean, like this week, for example, I've just started reaching out to writers to come on this podcast because I kind of want to expand the knowledge base that we have here, and also selfishly to be able to connect to those authors personally. But it's another leg of this chair, or it's another level of base for this pyramid. And you want to accrue all these skills and things. And part of that is going through competitions, maybe building a little bit of a thickness of skin in terms of, your rejections and taking your stripes and stuff. And yeah, using all these opportunities to go like, this is a learning experience. Try not to get taken advantage of by predatory competitions if you can. I actually haven't seen that many myself. I've been fortunate of that. But yeah, you just have to submit, do all the things you have to do to submit, and then kind of give it away to the universe and go, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. Meanwhile, going back and working on your stuff. And the guy I interviewed, Keelan Patrick Burke, who will do release after this episode, had a lot to say on that. So I'm really excited for you guys to see that as well. But yeah, I'd say, long story short, it's a long road. It's a marathon and not a sprint. So prepare yourself for it.
But speaking of drinking the Kool-Aid, just to make fun of myself, I absolutely write to competition deadlines because I'm a sucker.
Oh, yeah, me too. Yeah, me
I'll
too,
scroll
absolutely.
through Facebook and I'll be like, oh, that one's closing in 3 months. I look at my watch and I'm like, yeah, I can redraft the entire thing in 3 months. I can watch me. And then I pour all of myself into it, and then I enter the competition, and then I don't win, and I'm like,
yeah, he's devastated for like 2 days.
Destroy everything. Well, my confidence is in shatters. And then I scroll through Facebook and then I'm like, oh, not the competition.
Yeah.
So I've absolutely been on that doom wheel.
100%,
I'm doing it right now. So wish me luck.
Best of luck, Ellie.
Thank you. So yeah, win that lottery.
Yeah. I wanted to throw it over to you, Ali, because you have a bit of experience behind the curtain and could speak to that.
Yeah, no, I thought I could offer maybe a little bit of insight. I've done a little bit of judging. I've done judging for the John Hind Australian Writers Guild. It's their sci-fi feature film competition, and that was my very first experience kind of judging at that level, and it was really fascinating in that way, given, and I can only speculate it's similar everywhere, and I didn't realize this is how it actually worked, but we are sent the full feature screenplay, but as a round one judge, I was told only to read the first, I think it was 30 pages. It was either 30 or 50. And like they advised us not to read beyond that. We were to make our decision on the first 30 pages. And I found myself very quickly knowing within the first 5 pages if I was going to mark it to move on or not. And I started having like a mental checklist that I was reading it for. And then I had an epiphany being like, I need to write this mental checklist down, because then this is what I need to be doing when I apply to competitions, because suddenly I was inside the head of the judge. And the mental checklist was, I'm like, in the first 5 pages, is the genre clearly stated? And this was like, I could read 15 pages of a screenplay and I'm like, is this on a pirate ship? Is this a zombie? Is it post-apocalypse? I don't know what's happening. If I'm that far into it and I don't quite have a sense of the genre, I'm just like, no pile. But if it's in the first 5 pages, I'm like, yes, pile. You're holding my hand confidently through the story. You've demonstrated you know what structure and genre are to me. And what was the other conflict? If even in the first, it was amazing. First 5. I hate how when people say this and you're like, surely not the first 5. I don't have to do it in the first. It was the first 5 pages of a screenplay. If I wasn't aware what the main, even if the external struggle wasn't clear by that point, because you may not have reached an inciting incident yet, but if I wasn't aware what the internal struggle was going to be by 5 pages, if I hadn't had a hint that the protagonist was grappling with something, I'd be like, they're not going to get to it in 20 pages, are they? And that instinct was like usually right. It was, if I don't have a sense of the conflict that early on, it was in the no pile. Like
And that had to be the overall conflict of the story. It couldn't just be
no, it didn't have to be the conflict. I just had to have a sense of a conflict, a struggle. Is this guy gonna, or gal gonna be wrestling with something? Yeah, and I would keep reading, so it's not like I would stop at 5 and be like, but it was just funny how often my instinct was right, that if it wasn't in the first 5, it wasn't clear in the first 30. So that was the trend. And then the other question I was asking myself is, did I feel something? So when I would kind of and ah about it, I could be like, okay, yeah, they did demonstrate genre. Yeah, conflict's clear. But it's kind of that, but why should I care? Did I feel anything after reading 30 pages? And if I couldn't honestly say, yeah, I felt something, it in my mind, it wasn't worth passing on to the next judge. And for context, it wasn't just me as a gatekeeper at this level, it was me and one other judge. So we would come up with our own personal shortlist, and then we would go and hash it out in a Zoom. And for context, I was the nice judge. I had like 10 I wanted to pass on, and she had 3. And I maybe argued her up to 5 to consider to go to the next one. So if it sounds like I was being cutthroat, I was the nice one. I was giving them some benefit of the doubt. So that was a crazy eye-opening experience for me, being on the other side, where I was able to identify what I was looking for to decide if I wanted to pass it on. And then I'm like, wouldn't it be a great heckin' idea if I did that as a writer next time I enter a competition? Doesn't that sound so sensible, Ali? So I've tried to hold myself to a higher bar after that experience. And the other judging experiences I've had, I wasn't personally a judge, but I've done a lot of admin for competitions since working at Westwards. So I've watched the conversations the judges have. And it is this idea of, I've worked with partner organizations. So we're not just talking about Westwards, we're talking about a couple of different publishing houses here. And it is this sense that at the end of the day, it's a bit of a marketing thing. It's gross to say, but they're like, which is a good winner? That's a good look. Well, it's a good. What's a good story? Is the winner? I don't mean the manuscript, but the person and the journey the manuscript will go on. It's the story behind the story is taken into consideration a little bit as well. And I have personal feelings about whether or not that's a good thing or not, but I've watched that happen time and time again. That I'm like, the world is politics. The world is people want to work with people. That this is something I've worked out in the film industry as well. It's people don't necessarily want to work with ideas. People want to work with people. And if you come across as a personable, great, as Phoenix was saying, if you put your first your best foot forwards as a collaborator, that actually carries a lot of weight. People want to work with people.
And one other thing, kind of off of this, but kind of circling back to what Alex said about it being a marathon, not a sprint. And it's also like, I guess, because I guess the thing that gives me a lot of mental fortitude right now is like, yeah, it's a marathon, not a sprint. But at the same time, I'm not hyper focused on where I'm going. It's not like I'm not a writer because I'm not at the end of this marathon yet. It's like when I get a no, it's like, all right, back to what I was doing. Like I'm very much so on the point in the road that I'm on, and I'm just not. And I'm excited to be there, and I have stuff going for me where I am. So it's not like I'm reliant on someone else to step in and intervene to give me credibility or give me something to do here. Because it's like I've got my own, I know what I'm doing right now. One thing I wanted to add really, how many submissions competition?
With the sci-fi
the one you were judging.
screenwriting one?
Yeah.
I read maybe 40, and this would have been divided among, so if me and the person I was paired with were reading the same 40, I'm speculating there were maybe like 5 other pools. So like 40 times 5, like, yeah, they split us all up. So there was many different pools, and they had 2 judges across each pool.
Okay.
Yeah. No, there must have been more than that. I feel like in the end they said there were like 700 entries. So whatever that math works out to, but that's an award that usually gets about 700 entries to it. And it was 2020, and it would have been mid-year 2020. It's a sci-fi competition. And we're all about the zombie virus closing the world, and it was very hard for me to pass on any of the like 20 of the 40 that were about viruses taking over the world in the year 2020. Everyone really wanted to submit that. Maybe I was kind on one of, I'm like, that one actually did it in a really interesting, fun way, but all the others that submitted a generic virus story in 2020.
It is
interesting because just to interject, like, does anyone else feel like there has been almost negligible, until of course The Last of Us, almost negligible content about like a global pandemic, like, and given what a big deal that was, I don't know, that seems like maybe we're all just a little bit freaked out, but like, which is fair, but like that's so interesting that everyone was like, oh yeah, I want to write about this right now.
Everyone wrote it straight away.
Yeah.
And then I think all the judges like me or all the other gatekeepers went, fuck me. There's too much. There's a flood of this.
That's hilarious.
And very few of them are having an original take.
Yeah, well, there's that too, huh?
It was just too on the nose. Like, honestly, for me, it just didn't even occur to me. Wasn't it?
I'm just realizing I literally read exactly that for the Precipice thing. That's pretty much role.
Yeah, Alex, I don't know how to tell you this, but
I don't get it. I don't get it. What do you mean you don't like zombies? Like, it's fine.
Did you write that pre-2020?
Yeah, I did. That was actually the first thing I wrote as a writer, so it just so happened it was
You're
just
off the hook.
Yeah.
No, a mate of mine had a full-on book was published early 2020 that was a virus take over the world story, and it was just serendipitous. And then he's like, yeah, that book didn't sell.
Oh no.
Yeah, this is my worry, because it's always been like the genre I write in, and then it kind of happened in real life, and I was like, oh, similarities between my theories and reality. That's cool. And I was like, oh, but now none of my stuff will seem original. Now it just looks derivative. Great, awesome.
Now everyone's like, yeah, whatever, we were there.
Yeah. It's like, James, we don't need to read about this. We lived it. I'm like, crap.
Yeah.
What have I done?
Little tangent, but just like watching The Last of Us, how they had the intro and stuff, and they're talking about a global pandemic. this is the first time I've had the experience of watching something that was doom and gloom after we'd experienced a flavor of that same
Yeah.
thing. So it was more after the fact, and as opposed to like a fear of like what if. And so
Yeah.
like they were talking
like a
about it, and I was
smug
like,
little-
ah, yes, a pandemic. Best of luck
Been
to you.
there, felt that.
Yeah.
Like a weary camaraderie with the characters.
Yeah, been there, bought a
Rather than a
t-shirt.
horrific escapism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any other little nuggets of advice or any guidelines for entering competitions? Or do you think we've pretty much covered everything?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to realize that just because a story didn't win a competition, it does not mean it's not a good story. It might mean it needs to be reworked, but even not necessarily that. But just please do not tie your self-worth or the worth of your story to any response to a competition, especially if it's just one. You know, that would be my main port of call.
I feel like my stance is they're a necessary evil. I would highly encourage people to do it. They're a fantastic CV builder, and that's invaluable. But as Alex is saying, don't rely on them to be your meal ticket, and don't invest more into the application process than is worth your mental health, worth your time. Don't let it detract from other things. And I will attempt to take my own advice.
Yeah, and just like don't sit by the metaphorical door waiting for the response. Like you want to submit, and then just, if it comes back with something, excellent. But if you get a no, like what do you turn, like, live your life without it, continue on your track, know what you want apart from it. And then just when you get that no, it can feel, I know, for like I've said it a few times, but it's like when I get that no, it's just like back to what I was doing. It's not like it doesn't derail me. I'm not basing anything around it. I'm not like, and then once this victory comes in, then I'll do this. It's like, it's not the core of anything I'm doing. It's always just but it adds when it does come back good news.
Yeah, don't like sit and wait for the response don't think of it as like a judgment or as a sign of validation of the writing. Just submit it, put the work in, and then submit it, and then move back on to the next thing that you're working on. And don't focus too much on when is the competition date ending. Don't be checking emails and waiting for the response and stuff like that.
At the same time, it's very cool that Phoenix and Matan were nominated.
Oh yeah, and it's great. It's great to be shortlisted. Like it's a great feeling. As I've said, I've told my parents. But again, it's like, if it didn't happen, it's like cool and it adds when it does. But when it doesn't, it's like back to what I was doing. Like it doesn't change anything. It doesn't change anything unless it's good news. Then it's awesome. But if it's bad news, it doesn't change anything.
That's great advice. I think I'm a little bit too Slytherin to be that sensible. But that's great advice.
We like to win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
to win. You don't have to win.
Yeah.
Arguable, maybe.
Like that.
Discuss.
No, I agree with you on an intellectual level. I've just got to get my emotions to agree with you. Maybe one day I'll find that wisdom, that detachment. I think we're allowed to be human. Disappointments, normal.
Oh yeah.
And we're allowed to process that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Did somebody have a quote?
Yeah.
wrap
I've
us
got
up?
one. This is just a pretty meat and potatoes one, but I think it's appropriate. A professional writer is an amateur who didn't quit. Richard Bach. That's by Richard Bach. It's not an amateur writer. Professional writer was an amateur who didn't quit Richard Bach. I don't know what that would mean, but yeah. Anyway, it's written by Richard Bach.
He just holds up his hands at the end of the quote and just goes, Richard Bach.
Richard Bach out.
My anxiety is forcing me to clarify that I'm not talking about the Aurealis Awards, but I'm talking about disappointment. I'm picturing some other very specific writing competitions that I'm like still eternally fist shaking about.
Yeah.
No, for the record, I am over the moon that Precipice is
Yeah.
nominated twice.
Stoked. I mean, the good thing is we all get a credit because we were all editors, so that's
Mhm.
awesome. Like,
We're
it's
all
great.
editors,
It's
we're all
great that you
publishers.
guys. It's great that you guys won, but the rest of us just get sort of a free ride, which is cool.
You have excellent coattails, Phoenix. Thank you for allowing us to be here.
Yeah. Cheers to you and the
Thank you. I just wanted to say for the record, the competitions I am a little bit sore about are the Furious Fiction ones. Those little like 500 word prompt ones. I still shake my fist at some of those. I'm like, this is excellent stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna make this into a longer short story. I'm gonna submit it to other things. That's definitely
Take
happened.
that.
Also, just before you go, anyone listening, if you did like this podcast, if you like what you hear, yeah, give it a review, give it a rating. It helps other people find this, especially other, if you're a writer and have appreciated hearing some of what we're talking about, the reviews help other writers find this, and you never know who might need to hear it. You never know. Or who might just want to laugh at it. Who knows? But yeah, that would help us. Thanks.
All right. This has been the Prose Cons podcast. If you want to check out Glyphlight or Enter Elias Smidge, which are the two Aurealis nominations, they're available in the new Mythic, which is available on Amazon at the moment. Thank you very much and goodbye.
You're listening to Pros and Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast.